Hey guys, it's Joel Puncher's Paintball. Today we've got a how-to video. We've got the Planet Eclipse CS3 Mech frame that we've already installed on this beautiful peak performance CS3, and we are here to show you guys how to adjust your trigger on the new CS3 Mech frame. If you guys like this video, please make sure that you subscribe to our channel. Obviously like the video itself.
And then in the description is where you'll find a link to get one of these from Punishers.
That's correct, that's correct. Or Allen keys, or lube, or whatever else you need. We'll see you guys after the intro. All right, Doug, we've got the lights on.
Yeah, we need some extra eyes in
We're
here.
exposed here. All right, so first thing that I'd like to mention is we do have a muffler on this. These are super handy to have because as you're tuning markers or whatever the case may be, it's just a lot easier and it's not nearly as loud. Apologize to everyone's eardrums on our review and installation video on this.
Well, the pneumatics and stuff need some blowback, like some feedback, right? Like they need like something like a ball or
well,
anything.
for this, no, but it does come in handy for the LV series, right? It's kind of what this is actually designed for.
Gotcha.
Is the back pressure for that, but it works great for other guns as well, just to make things quieter. So we've already got this installed, and we are going to show you the different adjustments that you can make on this. I think overall there is, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, technically 4 different adjustment points on this trigger, and I'm going to touch on all of those. So first and foremost, we are going to take the bolt out. I'm going to slide the bolt out. I'm going to set it to the side there, and we are also going to have to take the grips off to be able to adjust everything. So it's as simple as sliding your tab there forward. Same thing on the other side. And then the easiest way that I found is to just get under this little tab right here and just free it up, and then it slides out just like that. I'm gonna set it with the case there, and then get underneath the grips right here. And that just, now you can tune the trigger with the grips off. Keep in mind that there's a little hole right here, needs to line up with the bolt cap. So as you're making adjustments to the trigger, that has to pop in all the way. Otherwise, you'll make the mistake which I just made, which was that my bolt popped out because I tried taking the grips off while my bolt was still in place. So you have to take the bolt out first, otherwise the bolt will pop out and you'll scare yourself. It's not going to hurt you, but you'll scare yourself.
That's a bad time.
Yeah. All right, so I've already kind of adjusted this trigger a little bit, but here are the adjustment points on this trigger. So the first and foremost is this little guy right here. That is going to be your post-travel adjustment screw.
What does post-travel mean, Joel?
So post-travel means the amount of trigger pull after the activation point. So on a pneumatic valve, pneumatic means air-powered, on a pneumatic valve, which this is what that is, there's going to be an activation point, because when you air this marker up, okay, so when you air this marker up, this guy right there, that little pin right there, is actually what is causing the valve to trigger. So when I pull this, all I'm doing is I'm depressing that pin. So it's actually this blue lever right here that's pushing pressure against that valve, the valve pin, which activates the valve to fire. Okay, so on the post travel, it's the amount of travel after. So if you think about it like this, if you think about it in a timeline, you've got a timeline here. This is the beginning of the, well, let's see here. Beginning of the trigger pull. As you pull the trigger, at some point there's going to be an activation point. We'll put that there, okay? That's your activation point. This is called pre-travel.
Okay.
Activation point, which is when the marker actually fires.
Okay.
Okay. And the amount of post-travel. Okay, so this screw right here controls the amount. This screw here in the actual frame of the marker controls the amount of post travel. Okay. Now so on this marker, here to here. There is no pre-travel. So basically, what that means is you use your activation point. Okay. So if the pre-travel is set, okay, so if you take the activation point out, at some point the post travel, as you move the post travel forward, which is going counterclockwise in. If you go counterclockwise in, it's going to make the trigger pull shorter.
Okay.
At some point, the post travel is going to pass the activation point, which means that the marker will no longer fire.
Okay.
Okay. So if I continue to go in with the post travel screw, okay, if I take 2 more turns, and I actually had it fine tuned, I only needed a quarter of a turn. When I pull the trigger, nothing happens.
Because you're
and that's because my post travel, okay, when I go in, I'm moving this forward. My post travel has passed my activation point.
I made it redundant.
Yes, correct. So at this point, all I'm doing is pulling this. So the pre-travel never changes on the CS3 Mech frame. I think on the TM40 there is a pre-travel and post-travel. Actually, no, I think there is only post-travel. So you're using your post-travel to control the amount of trigger length. And then what you're going to have to do is use the activation point. So if you want a really short trigger pull, like this, okay, you're going to have to bring your activation point forward.
Got it.
Does
So
that make sense?
you can adjust the activation point.
You can adjust the activation point, which we'll get to in just a second.
Okay.
2 things I'd like to touch on before we get into like really fine tuning this is most people that play mech, what they want is they want a very light trigger pull so that you can graze on the trigger and really get it ripping. There's 2 different adjustment points on that. So the first one is your magnetic. So your magnetic is, can you zoom in there and get that done?
I am getting in there.
That is your magnetic right there. So the forwardmost screw is your post travel. 1 screw in is your magnetic. If you want the magnetic to be less, meaning less snappy, and there's going to be a little bit of resistance obviously from the pneumatic valve itself, but if you want any type of resistance besides the pneumatic valve itself gone, you're going to want to back this out.
Okay.
Which is what the majority of people are going to want. Okay, so I've got that backed out. Okay.
Like basically all the way?
Correct. Now I've got my post travel really far in there. With pneumatic mechanical frames, there's going to have to be a certain amount. It's not, so when you have an electronic frame, it's a micro switch. So you can really get it down to a very, very short trigger pull. Okay. Because all you're doing is you're activating that micro switch. With a mechanical frame, there's a pneumatic valve, which means you need enough trigger pull. It can't be this short like a micro switch is. It has to be a little bit longer in order to not only engage the pneumatic valve, but enough trigger pull to release the pneumatic valve in order to bolt to recharge. Okay. Okay. Does that make sense, Doug?
I think it does.
People out there. Okay.
Well, yeah, because you have to it has to recharge to a certain level of PSI per shot. So that's why you need to allow it to do it.
What's really cool about these, it's different than autocockers, like where you could short stroke and stuff like this. These are pretty well tuned to the point where you pull it and you let it go, and you can't really short stroke it because it recharges so quickly, and the recharge point is very close to where the activation point is.
Gotcha.
Okay.
That's just modern engineering.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so you've adjusted your magnetic. If you want something snappier, you're going to want to go in with the magnetic screw.
Okay.
Okay. And then the other thing that you're going to need is, if you want, there's also a spring in there. So you can see the spring right here, which controls your lever.
Yep.
Okay. If you go in with this screw, it's going to make that spring tighter, more resistance for the trigger pull.
Make the trigger pull heavier.
Correct. Now, the majority of people are going to want that backed out. So you're actually going to use the same Allen key that you used to take out the screws in your trigger frame when you initially installed it, and you can back this out. Okay. Now, it's only going to go so far. I think I did about half a turn out, and at that point, it's pretty much, there's no resistance besides the actual pneumatic pressure of the valve pin. Okay. So then at that point, really what you're doing is you're fine tuning. Most people like a short trigger pull when it's mechanical. So you're bringing that post travel forward. Okay. If your activation point's here when it's stock, when you receive it. Okay. You're bringing that post travel forward. You're probably going to bypass it. Okay. Now, the only other thing that there is the activation point. And this is kind of a different design. I've never seen this. But the activation point on this is this red block right here. Okay?
Interesting.
These 2 screws are retaining screws. If you want to adjust that, if you want to adjust that, you're going to back these out. And you can see it moved, okay?
Oh.
Planet says that if you move it clockwise rotation, okay, so clockwise meaning to the right, if you move it clockwise, it's going to move the activation point forward.
Okay.
Okay, which is what you want.
Yeah, because of the...
Right?
If you bypass it, then you want to, yeah.
If this is your post travel, you want to bring your activation point forward to make your trigger pull shorter.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, if you bring it backwards, counterclockwise as much as you can, like this, okay, then it's going to bring it back, which is probably not what you want. Unless you want a really long trigger pull. Then if you want a really long trigger pull, you're going to want to do the exact opposite of what I'm doing. You're going to want to back out your post travel, and you're going to want to bring this into a counterclockwise position. So what I'm going to do is I am going to go as clockwise as I can, and just based upon the easiest way that I found doing this is I took this, and you can see these little 3 screws right here. So 1, 2, 3. The three lines here, the 3 lines you want to the left of the 3 lines on the frame.
Okay.
Okay, and then I'm using an Allen key to hold it into place, and I'm gonna tighten this down, and at that point, that's as far forward as the activation point is on the valve. So I'm gonna tighten these down, that way it doesn't move. This is an interesting design, I've never seen this before.
Curious how it'll hold up and perform.
Well, I know it was the same on the CS3 Mech frame.
Okay, so they kind of pioneered
it was
this.
similar. Yeah, and I don't know if it's a patent thing or whatever, but like on the TM40, it's just a screw.
Right.
That, you know, the screw goes in, the activation point comes forward, the screw comes out, or vice versa, whatever the case may be. But that's for a different day. Okay, so now I'm going to air the marker. As you can see, I'm still pulling it and nothing's happening. So that means that my activation point is still behind the post travel. So then at that point, I can't really do anything. I can't make the trigger pull any shorter. So then what I'm going to do is I am going to slowly back out the post travel, which is the forwardmost screw. I'm going to slowly back that out, quarter of a turn at a time. As you can see, there's still that. So I'm getting close to the activation point.
Like that.
A little bit more. There you guys have it. Okay, now you can see that when I pull it, I kind of have to put a little bit of pressure, which means right now the post travel is kind of like sitting right on the activation point. So what I want to do is I want to take the screw out just a little bit further, just so that I have enough. That way I don't short circuit, because what can happen is you're pulling the trigger and it might fire, but then like you're having trouble consistently getting to that. It's that because this post travel is sitting right on the activation point, you want to move it ever so slightly. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's about as fine-tuned as you're going to get it.
Oh.
Okay. So there you guys have it. That is how to adjust it. I can't really think of anything else. So once again, this is your activation point. This is your post travel forwardmost screw. I personally like a really short trigger pull, light trigger pull. That's
Same.
how most people do on a mech frame. So you're going to want to go in with the post travel. You're going to want to back out your magnetic return screw, and same thing on the back here. You're going to want to back that out a little bit, and there you go. That's pretty fine-tuned when it comes to the CS3 Mech frame. If you guys like this video, please subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'd like to hear any comments, any questions. Feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll try and answer that stuff for you guys. And we'll see you guys when we're out there shooting it.
I'm so free.